Chad Lipsky, Lemoore One, Stout.
Thanks, Jim.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And Richard Nelson, Orleans One, Derby.
Michelle Boslin, Wyndham 3.
John O'Brien, 1 Pound Orange, Bridgman town, and your town.
Stradlin.
In Windsor.
Stradler.
Supernat Windsor 4, Barnard Pomfret, Bridgewater, West Hartford.
I've learned more about farming from this young lady than anyone that I know, so.
We are here today to have you, Senator Major, walk us through, or just give us an introduction, really, then we'll have the council walk us through S60. And it's a bill that will look, it may look familiar because there's a companion House bill that we had a walkthrough on a while ago now. It may look familiar, but some of the details may be a little fuzzy. So I'll turn it over to you, and we've blocked out a half hour between the two of you. We have Ben and Jerry's coming in at 1:30, by the way. We rescheduled that conversation for 1:30.
Someone may stay a little longer.
I'm not sure if it's going to be like a 3D presentation or just
Come on.
As long as they have samples. Yeah, yes. For the record, Senator Joe Major, Vice Chair of the Senate Agriculture Committee. I'm here today to talk to you about S60, an act relating to establishing the Farm Security Special Fund and provide grants to farm losses due to weather conditions. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of S60 is to establish the Farm Security Special Fund to provide financial relief to Vermont farmers affected by severe weather conditions. In recent years, Vermont farms have faced increasing losses due to unpredictable extreme weather events, which existing relief programs have failed to adequately cover. This legislation aims to fill the gaps created by dedicated source of financial assistance for farmers suffering uninsured or uncovered losses due to weather-related disasters. Here are some of the numbers that bear that out. In 2023, Vermont farms lost $44.7 million in weather-related disasters. In 2024, it was $13.5 million. Here's some of the background and need for this legislation. Increasing occurrences of extreme weather events such as flooding, drought, high winds, hail, abnormal freezing conditions have significantly impacted productivity. Many small-scale farms and diversified farms in particular lack access to comprehensive insurance or federal relief programs, leaving them vulnerable to severe financial distress following weather-related losses. S60 addresses this pressing need by creating a state-administered fund to support affected farmers and sustain Vermont's agricultural resistance. The farm amends 6 VSA Chapter 207 to create a new subchapter entitled the Farm Security Special Fund. It defines key terms such as eligible weather conditions and farm eligibility requirements. It establishes the fund under the administration of the Agency of Agriculture to provide grants for farmers facing financial losses due to eligible weather conditions. Grants cover up to 50% of uninsured or covered losses, capped of $150,000, per farm per year. Losses eligible for reimbursement include lost wages, destroyed crops, debt payments, replanting costs, feed replacement costs, equipment repairs, and road repairs. The program requires the Secretary of Agriculture to develop income-based criteria for applicants and establish a transparent and efficient application process. Applications will be processed within 15 days of receipt. The Secretary of Agriculture will create a review board to evaluate applications and recommend awards to the Secretary. The board will be comprised of representatives of the Agency of Agriculture, the State Chief Recovery Officer, agricultural organizations, and farmers. This will ensure fair and efficient distribution of funds, and it will also conduct an annual review of the program. The program allots $7.5 million from the general fund in fiscal year 2026 to establish and implement the fund. The act takes effect in July of 2025.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, the bill originated in the Ag Committee
Yes.
and then went, obviously, it's here now, went through the full Senate process.
Appropriations, and then in each was unanimous 5-0 and 7-0 in appropriations.
And then was there a voice vote on the floor?
No, I mean, yes, I'm sorry, it was a vote, and it passed unanimously.
Good. Questions from the committee? Representative O'Brien.
This is the one that started out at 20 million was
That is correct.
does it have a money figure attached by Senate approbes?
7.5.
And then who would stand this up? Would the Agency of Ag be the ones who?
Yes, the board would ultimately, but in the end, the Secretary of Agriculture would make the final decision.
Do they need to create positions?
No, the ag would determine who is going to be on the board, and you're speaking to the board. Is that accurate?
More just how the board would make recommendations.
Right.
This farm had losses. It
Correct.
deserves,
Correct.
much money, but then just.
The administration of it, I see. No, they would work from the staffing that they have currently.
Representative Boswell.
I think I'm good.
Nothing?
Who did you get testimony from? We can look this up.
No. That's fine. We got testimony from the sponsor, who was Senator Ruth Hardy, Roy Beckford from UVM Extension, Nicole Dubuque, the Agency of Agriculture, Doug Farnham, the Chief Recovery Officer from the Agency of Administration, Jackie Folsom, the Vermont Agricultural Affairs Association, Melanie Harrison, who is a farmer, Maddie Kepner from NOFA, Justin Rich, also a farmer, Charlie Roy, claims specialist, Amy Schollenberger from Action Circles, Sam Smith from Intervale Center, and Mary White, the vice president of the Vermont Farm Bureau.
Many of those are familiar names. Representative Lipsky.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and maybe I'm directing this question to you, but do we have a companion bill
So, yeah, and
here?
there was a bill, it's one of those bills up there, I'm not remembering the number, that is similar, not identical.
It's 229.
When we have Ledge Council walk through this bill, we're going to hear about this bill. But at some point, I asked Mike if he could explain, maybe with a side-by-side, just where the differences were between the House bill that is on our wall and the Senate bill.
I'm sorry, Amy, she snuck in behind me and I didn't, and I mentioned her name.
She's a frequent guest.
Well, I would suspect so. Frequent guests downstairs as well.
Welcome.
No. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, having lived it, this is a much needed bill. We took it on the chin in 23. We took it in the gut in 24. We didn't apply. It was for BGAP. It was pretty hard to apply as I was driving back from watching a cornfield wash away and I saw a house hanging half over a river. I still had a home. So we just, but Matt Linehan over in Guildhall lost his 40-acre potato crop. And that darn near put him out. A matter of fact, I heard he was leaving, but I guess he's decided to stay. And I thank the Senate Ag for taking this up and a lot more money than we had in our side.
That's what I recall.
The focus, medium and smaller farms, some that don't have crop insurance in particular, we wanted to be that safety net for them. And I think, Representative Nelson was right on in a lot of the testimony that we heard. And the other part of this was, which we wanted to find out is, would this prohibit farmers from getting crop insurance? And overwhelmingly, it was no. And with the limit of $150,000 plus the board that would review, there's a couple of stopgaps that would limit that.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll echo Representative Nelson. Thank you. As chair, thanks for the committee for doing the work. And let's see, one more question, then we'll have Mike come up.
Joe, I just wondered, given the statistics you gave, 44 million, 23, 13.5 and 24. This doesn't even begin to make even not whole, even half.
Sure.
Those losses. So how is it just first come, first served?
It is exactly that. And we wanted to have something. I mean, we came with 20 million and the other part of it with, the federal government as well, just quite frankly saying almost no funding for we wanted to make sure that our medium and smaller farms got something, and we gave something. We hoped that we don't have to use it. This is a great thing about it. I mean, it's only for a weather event. I was in the military, and I remember one of the things that we learned was we're training, hoping to never use our training. And this is exactly for that as well.
A lot of those losses in that 44 million, some of the larger farms, it was nothing for there to be $500,000 in losses. And, on paper. So, it's limited to 150,000, half the losses. And, and that's quite a loss to bear. But when you have someone that has a small vegetable farm and they get wiped out, we had other feeds to fall back on, we still milked our cows. They had nothing. So there'll be, looks at comparisons, I'm sure. And, maybe the bigger farms won't get the full 150,000, but, if you got 50,000, it would have helped, but to make sure that people are held is, help is help.
Yeah.
And, and the vintners, we heard about them losing their great crop, and not for 1 year, but for 2. Because the vines have to grow.
We've been hearing these stories for, well over a year. Thanks.
Thank you.
So that sucks. No Ben and Jerry's.
Welcome to stay. They may show up. They will show up.
If you want
I may, give me a call when
if you want to be on the speed dial.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. Yeah.
If we give you Ben and Jerry's, we're gonna have to send a cup down for Russell too. I know we have.
Yeah, that's very true.
Maybe a pint.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
All right, Mike, if you would like to join us,
See the house for order.
Should we separate you two?
You know, the immature, the less mature corner you it's descended to this.
We're gonna get sent to the speaker's office, yeah.
Competition here. The chortle.
all right, let us turn our attention to that end of the table again. So here's S60.
This is Mike O'Grady with S60 and Act relating to establishing the Farm Security Special Fund to provide grants for farm losses due to weather conditions. Just doing a general overview, there's a finding section that reflects the flooding in 2023 and 2024 and other climate fuel disasters that devastated farms and working lands, businesses in the state. Many existing state and federal programs are designed to support farms are difficult to access or administratively burdensome and don't meet current Vermont farmers' needs. In particular, federal crop insurance programs are not designed for smaller or diversified farming operations, and many Vermont farms are not covered by crop insurance. The state should establish a permanent funding support program to maintain viability of farms in Vermont in order to ensure food security, climate resilience, rural economic vitality, environmental health, and continuously invest in farms in a way that makes them more resilient to current and future challenges, provide a source of relief funds permanently available to farmers impacted by climate emergencies and extreme weather. There would be a new subchapter added to a chapter in Title VI related to promotion, marketing of farms, but it's now going to be promotion, marketing, and support of Vermont farms. There is a definition section. You get funding for losses from eligible weather conditions. So there's a list of eligible weather conditions: high winds, moisture, rain, extreme heat, freeze, fire, hail, drought, or any other severe weather or growing condition determined by a review board, which you'll see set up in a minute.
That gives some flexibility then if it's any other.
Yeah, I mean,
Let's slide.
the one that I remember was the derecho. Do anybody remember that? And but that would have been a high wind, probably.
Representative O'Brien?
Like, but it's all weather related though. I mean, say, probably not in Vermont, but an attack of locusts that's maybe created by some sort of climate change would not be eligible.
I think the review board would have some ability, some flexibility there. It's a growing condition impacting agricultural income. I think that would be something that they could have discretion to determine as eligible.
Okay,
Great. Representative Nelson?
Yeah, not locusts, but armyworms.
right, yeah.
I've seen them terrible. But I'm glad you have hail in there. Hail is not so much a widespread damaging event, but it could be localized. And it could decimate somebody's blueberry crop a week before, 3 days before harvest. In winters and orchards and vegetables and, so I'm glad that's listed in there. I wouldn't have thought of that.
So it's pretty, you've got the specifics and then there's the sort of the catch-all and it sounds like you're comfortable, John, but I think it's a good point that there may be other invasive species or, I don't know that we can attribute that to climate change necessarily, but.
Seed maggots.
Okay, well, we can think about this as we go ahead.
So there's definitions of farm and farming, which are drawn from the RAPs and are pretty intuitive. Then there's the creation of the Farm Security Special Fund, created at the Agency of Agriculture, managed by the Secretary of Agriculture. It consists of funds transferred by the General Assembly. And it shall ensure language accessibility through procurement and provision of interpretation and translation services. And all balances at the end of the year carry forward, and that's important, especially in a year where you don't use all of the balance. Then you have the section that relates to the award of the grants. It's the secretary, after consultation with the review board, awards the grants from the fund to farms that have incurred financial losses or expenses due to an eligible weather condition. They shall be in an amount that reimburses a farm for up to 50% of uninsured or otherwise uncovered losses, up to $150,000 total per year per qualified farm. To address the issue of farms that might have been profitable, even though they incurred losses due to a weather condition, the secretary shall establish criteria for the amount of an award based on the annual net income of the farm in relation to the median net income of all farms. So that will effectively be a modifier that could raise or lower the award. The secretary has the ability to verify all the eligible weather conditions, either through reviewing available data through NOAA or other sources, or doing site visits. The types of losses reimbursable include wages, replacement of lost income from destroyed crops or impacted livestock, debt payments or other ongoing expenses, replanting costs, livestock feed, infrastructure equipment, farm road repair, and repair of roads necessary to access farms. I think that's important. Sometimes a dairy farmer can't get their milk picked up because the hauler won't go up the road to their farm.
Right, Richard.
And other losses is determined by the secretary after consultation with the review board. So again, there's ability and flexibility built in for the determination if a loss is eligible. There's going to be streamlined application. You have to provide a description of the damage occurred, attestation of the eligible weather condition, an estimate of losses, a year-end report. You have to give your Schedule F to show your income.
John, any questions?
Mike, just following up on what Richard was mentioning, there's not a metric or some sort of equation for the say revenue of a farm and how much it lost. So, I'm a small farm, I make $50,000 a year, I just lost all of that, whereas an LFO, say, with $4 million, it lost the same amount,
You have done programs like that in the past, but what the response was is that the agency needed too much information, which made the application process too complicated, which slowed down the award, which led to people just either bailing out of the application or not getting the award until after it was useful.
the turnaround's really important here.
The turnaround is very important here, and it's very fast. Before I get to the turnaround, someone asked, is it first come, first serve? It is first come, first serve, but you have to have your administrative complete application in. Just by putting in some half-done application doesn't get you first in line. You have to put in an application with all the information that's necessary for the agency to process the application. But then it's used up until gone. So if it's gone and you apply, there's nothing there for you. And here is the turnaround, page 6, line 3.
Can I ask you about that? Mike? So presumably this will be funded, it could be funded annually by the legislature, and it could be funded by other sources. I think that language is in here.
Yeah.
So the way that it's written now, if somebody applied and there was no money, but then say the next day somebody donated to it.
Sure. I mean,
falling into a.
Sure. There are some programs that operate that way. the application stays alive until there's further funding in the program.
Yeah.
Some don't. Some say that the program is closed once all awards are made
And then reopens.
and reopens again. So that is maybe something to discuss with the agency on how they would propose to operate it. So here's the turnaround. All administratively complete applications have to be evaluated by the review board. Within 15 days following receipt of the complete application, the review board has to, by majority vote, recommend to the secretary whether to issue a grant to the applicant. If the review board recommends an award, the secretary shall issue the award within 15 days. So effectively, application in, grant out within 30 days, which is fast.
But you have to turn in your schedule out.
You do.
So the damage happens on July 10th. I don't know why I think of that day. You probably aren't gonna get your grant until January, February.
That's a possibility, or you could submit your Schedule F from the previous year.
Okay. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
So there is that review board that's set up. It's at the agency. It includes the secretary or designee, the state chief recovery officer, representatives of 3 ag organizations who can demonstrate expertise in all sizes of farms and offering technical assistance or advocacy or have a proven record of working with farmers. And then 2 farmers who have received relief funding appointed by the secretary. They all serve 3-year terms, except some of the initial terms are staggered to provide for overlap. The board has power to review all the applications and assess their accuracy and recommend the grants. They annually report to you, the General Assembly, about the total documented Vermont farm financial losses from eligible weather conditions. In order to ensure the fund is meeting the needs of the Vermont ag community, the board annually reviews the application process and recommends changes to the General Assembly to improve its effectiveness. They get to elect officers, quorums is a majority. They get compensated if they're not state employees. Can anybody see what's missing? There's no money.
Yeah.
There's no money. The Appropriations Committee removed the money. There had been a 7.5 million request in what the Senate Ag Committee had passed out. But as House Ag did with the Vermonters Feeding Vermonters program, Senate took the appropriation out. They didn't put the contingency funding in it. So this isn't something that has that contingency. However, if they fund it, it will have a contingency in it in the appropriations bill. So this will be in statute, but it will be inoperable until it is funded.
So, the budget bill, did we pass it out today?
Because of capital.
Earlier today, we had the 3rd reading.
Yeah, you passed, 3rd reading today. They tried to take up budget adjustment in the Senate today, but that didn't go. So and I know Senator Probst has already been working on the budget.
So if Senator Probst, during their work on the budget, decides that they want to fund this at some level, and then pass a budget that, an amendment that includes that, then we go through the conference process or.
It's reconciliation.
Yeah.
So if they pass it in their budget, it has to be in one of their budgets when it passes. But if it's in one, then it's up for discussion and inclusion in the final big bill.
So recognizing that it's not in our version, it could end up in the final version. And then the waterfall wouldn't be necessary. It would be.
Right. I mean, well, they're going to draft it as a waterfall, as you saw from the Vermonters Feeding Vermonters, even though that program is in statute, even though it recognizes that it's going to operate from year to year, because what the House Appropriations Bill did with that 500,000 at the end of the night, they made it a contingency. It's outside the base budget of the agency. So the agency is going to have to advocate for it to be in their base budget next year. It's not going to automatically be base.
Can I just clarify?
Please.
It's Amy Schmalber representing Notified. It's not on the contingency list. It's just on the one-time list. So Mike is correct. It's not in the base budget, but it is appropriated, not as contingency, just as one. 500.
But Jeff was still saying it was a contingent appropriation.
But
Well, maybe we can have JFO come in and explain why they think that's the case. Okay,
it's in the 11.
John,
Typically, if there was money for something like this, does it run on like the state's fiscal year? Can the agency set up sort of when it begins and when it doesn't? Because I can certainly see, a year, say there's a big disaster in June, the money's all gone, but there was something in the previous year, but this body has dedicated a new 10 million, in the upcoming fiscal year. Does it just get, they say, well, wait a year, wait a month, we'll have money, come July 1st.
Again, I think that's something to clarify with the agency about how they're going to do this. Because this fund gets carryover, I don't think it's going to be limited to the fiscal year. I think they're going to be able to approve applications as they come through and then award grants as they have the money. But you probably want to confirm that with the agency. Hopefully it will always have money in it. One of the things that some of the environmental funds do is they capitalize their fund. They make sure that they get 3 million or 5 million upfront, and then they only want $500,000 a year after that because they're just rolling the entire time. So that's part of the funding discussion. New programs are at a disadvantage. They don't know what the program does. They don't know how successful it is or will be. They don't know the need, even though there's a stated and demonstrated need. So it's kind of like you get a year or two to prove yourself. And sometimes when you do that, they do really well. Like some of the ag water quality funds, they started out, nobody thought they were going to go anywhere. And they are very vigorous now.
With the VITA money that we just put into something similar for loans, there's no conflict, is there, between the two?
Yeah.
So you could get, 50% of your losses covered with this and then get a loan, say, from VITA for the other half.
Yes. So this is only for unreimbursed losses. So if you had some sort of insurance, if you had some sort of assistance that paid for a portion of your losses, you don't get to apply for that, but you can apply for the remainder.
yeah, Sean.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify. So when Joe said, oh, it was approved 7-0, they approved the idea of it, but without any money attached. So really, when it was passed out of the Senate, it was passed as a lovely idea without any way to figure out how to fund any of it. Like with ours, at least with the Vermonters Feeding Vermonters, it was the same thing. And then they said, oh, here, 500,000 looks good.
Right.
But we actually don't have any number that goes associated with this from the Senate.
Right, because they moved Vermonters for me feeding Vermonters on the same day they moved their budget.
Right.
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 And the Senate, and it was great. The reporter in the Senate got up and said, we support this. We supported it 7-0. We think it's a good idea. But we took the money out. That's what we did.
That's what they do. And it's what we do too. And it was a happy coincidence that on the very same day, in our case, the
Yeah.
budget was going through a Brooks.
So in the end, for this to get funded, is it likely it's gonna be when we're here in the second half of the session? Or is it gonna probably end up going all the way back to conference committee or something? Like, when would we find out if it did pass here? When will we find out what's?
So if we pass the bill, and we can do whatever we want with this, right? We can take it the way that we see it in front of us. We can change some language,
Yeah.
put money back in.
Yeah.
Certainly. And then, the House would pass it presumably. And if they did, then we would have a conference on this bill the way that any bill does. The funding piece then is going to be worked out separately in appropriations. Ultimately.
You have
Yes.
another option, and so it's what you did with the organic program, assistance program. Remember, that passed one body.
Yeah.
But then it got passed out of committee and then it just sat in an appropriations committee, and then it was put on the appropriations bill once they knew the number that they were
We
gonna.
had passed that out in the BAA
Right.
that didn't go forward that way.
So a contingency fund, is that like we can, there's 7.5 million in a contingency fund, is that like June 30th when the number, or July when the numbers roll in and they say we ended up with more money than we had?
It can work that way. Amy's right, there is like a line item for it.
With money from.
Right. But then there's things like they can roll over. It's like if X is appropriated here, but if only X is, if only Y is spent, then that they call it waterfall to this program for that use.
So we can get into this more another time. We have our friends from Ben and Jerry's waiting to join the room. And they were already bumped this morning, so I don't want to keep them waiting too much longer. But are there any other questions about the language in the bill itself?
I just had one on the money following up on you. What happens if we put the money back into it when you have a bill that's sort of chasing a budget without that money appropriated?
If your committee puts money back into it and it goes, then it's going to go to the House Appropriations Committee and they're going to take it out.
What they do? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Mike, so I know you are on the schedule following this next presentation. You're welcome to stay if you want to be part of that or to observe, but if you need to go do other things, we can call you when we're ready.
I'm going to go talk to Amy.
Okay.
If you smell ice cream, stick around.
All right. Let's let, do we have Ben and Jerry's in the Zoom room? Hey, Tom.
$1 million. I believe you this year.
Tom, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you for waiting patiently. I don't know whether you were here this morning and then left, or if you were always going to be Zooming.
Well, I was most of the way there, but I understand things come up, especially this time of year. So it just this afternoon has to be virtual. That's all. So apologize for that.
Well, thank you for being flexible. We have, I think you have a presentation that you wanted to share, or maybe you didn't want to share it, but it is on our website and you can pull it up if you want to share it.
Yeah, sure. I'd like to just, if it's all right, walk you through some of the things that Ben and Jerry's has been doing the last several years on the dairy front, in particular here in Vermont. And it's been a while since we've kind of connected with the House Ag many years, and so I wanted to let you guys know what we've been up to, and if there's ways we can support some things down in Montpelier, I'm happy to take a look at it. So
great. If you want to just introduce yourself for the record, tell us your position and so forth.
Yeah, sure. Tom Gates, Vice-led dairy specialist for Ben and Jerry's, located in South Burlington, Vermont. And I oversee dairy programming for Ben and Jerry's here in the US as well as over in Europe.
We'll just do some very quick intros so you know who the committee is, since it's been a while since you were here. Michelle.
Thank you.
Sure. Michelle Bosline. I represent Wyndham 3, which includes Rockingham, Westminster, and Brookline. We actually had a Ben and Jerry's factory in Bellows Falls 20 years ago when I first moved there.
Hi, Representative Don O'Brien. I represent Royal Penn in my hometown, Pembridge.
Hi, Heather Supernat. I represent Windsor 4, the towns of Barnard, Pomfret, Bridgewater, West Stratford.
David Durfee, represent Shaftesbury, Sunderland, and Glastonbury.
Leland Morgan, I represent Grand Isle County and a portion of the town of Milton.
Jed Lipsky, represent Memorial 1 District, Stowe.
And Richard Nelson, Orleans 1, Derby.
All right, that's us.
All right. Well, here I can jump right in here if that's okay. Let me see if I can get the screen share going here. Let's see.
Richard, did any of your milk ever go to Ben and Jerry's?
Not ours. My nephew did when he was over in St. Albans.
Can you guys see my screen?
Nope.
You can't. All right, let me try this again. All right.
Oh, it looks
There
like
we
it's coming. There we go.
There we go.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, again, Tom Gates. I reside in Franklin, Vermont. I grew up on a dairy farm in Franklin. Spent many years in working for St. Albans Cooperative, and have worked for Ben and Jerry's for, I guess, directly over 5 years now. And again, oversee the dairy programming at Ben and Jerry's. And so, just wanted to take you guys through over the next 20, 30 minutes, just a little bit about, what Vermont dairy means to Ben and Jerry's, how we've been working with farms in the state, how we've been investing in farms in the state, and some of the impacts that we've had through the programming at Ben and Jerry's, which we call Caring Dairy. So, just to kind of kick things off, I think that what you have on your screen is an ad that we put in the St. Albans Messenger. I think it was May of 2020, back when we were in the infancy days of COVID. And at the end of the day, while we have different options for many different consumers, we are a dairy company, and without the farmers, the dairy farmers, we wouldn't be able to be the Ben and Jerry's that we are. And so we have a lot of respect for the stewardship, for the efforts and the caretaking that our farms do on farms across the state of Vermont. As I assume folks would know, unfortunately, we've seen a decline in farm numbers over the years, both at the national level as well as here within the state of Vermont. Has been a troubling continuing trend for, unfortunately, a couple of decades. Cow numbers, while they remain stable in the 2010s and the early 2000s, we've seen a decline on cow numbers in the state as well. And there's a number of factors, but certainly some of the volatility in milk pricing has been a real challenge for dairies here in the state of Vermont as well as throughout the nation. So as Ben and Jerry's, we are not buying farm milk directly from the farm. We are buying a couple of components of the milk, primarily butterfat, which is coming in the form of cream, and then non-fat solids, which is coming in the form of a wet condensed solids product that we buy. And so when you look at really that 100 pounds of milk, we're buying primarily the sliver in yellow, and then a combination of the slivers in gray and white, with the butterfat being the primary ingredient in our ice cream. And just to give a sense of how much just to give a sense of how much, butterfat, or how much farm milk it takes to create the butterfat that we need. It actually takes 10 tractor trailer loads of farm milk off the farm to generate 1 load of cream at 40% butterfat. And we're buying many loads a week of cream. So it equates to a lot of milk. As a progressive company with a dedicated mission statement in the areas of product quality, an economic mission, and then our social mission, this is really the foundation of shared prosperity that we have. And that's one of the primary things that allows us to do the programming that we do with the dairy farms that we work with in the state, trying to have linked prosperity from across the entire supply chain. And so this is really the foundation for what we are able to do with farmers. So when I speak to dairy programming, the program is called Caring Dairy. And so I wanted to just walk through that with you all. So when we look at our Caring Dairy program in the United States, we also have a program in Europe as well, where we produce product. Really our focus Milkshed, where we're working with dairy farms, continues to be here in the state of Vermont. It's been a priority for us for many, many years, working with family farms, and it continues to be that case. And we're very lucky in that we have a very dense population of farms still that are participating in our program, with 80% of the milk participating in our Caring Dairy program being within 30 miles of our plant facility in St. Albans, which is our biggest manufacturing facility. And so when we talk about the farms participating, currently we have about 48 farms here in the state of Vermont that participate in our Caring Dairy program. And our goal on an annual basis is to have enough farms participating in our programming to represent the equivalent milk volume of our US dairy buy. And so it's not a super straightforward calculation just because we're buying fat, not farm milk. But the idea is to have the milk represented within our program. And that equates to approximately 20% of the production of milk in the state of Vermont.
That's huge.
So, and if any questions come up, please feel free to chime in as I'm going along here. A little bit about the program. In the infancy of Caring Dairy, and the really kind of the brainstorming back in the early 2000s, the idea was to try to create some indicators around sustainability in the dairy industry. And at the time, we'd worked with Michigan State and others to really develop some indicators of sustainability. And what we've done over that time since then, we've introduced Caring Dairy in Europe back in the mid-2000s, and then we officially introduced Caring Dairy in the United States in 2011. And so, the essence of the program is to drive both practice-based and impact-based practices on dairy farms to drive a variety of different impacts that I'll speak to. But it incorporates environmental, it incorporates labor standards, it incorporates animal care standards, and it really has been a program that Ben & Jerry's has been extremely proud of. It provides, risk mitigation for us, for the farms. It provides supply resiliency, and we've got some data to back up that it is helping farms have impacts, but also it's helping the bottom line for the farms as well. As Ben & Jerry's, we've had a long history of leadership within the industry. We were one of the first brands to request RBGH free milk through our Caring Dairy program in the mid-2000s. We were able to push for ceasing the practice of docking of tails, which we know that farmers had multiple opinions on at the time. But within a year, the industry ended up following. And, as we look ahead, we're trying to figure out the best way to grow feed here in the state of Vermont, where we can maximize the amount of components like fat and protein, with a similar number of animals here in the state. And with that, we're also looking at how do we reduce on-farm greenhouse gas emissions. So when you look at the Caring Dairy program, it's really broken up into 4 different pillars. And these pillars are consistent with our program in Europe, but due to different regulations, how we go about achieving our targets may be a little bit different, but the goals are all the same. The first is around trying to boost up the farmer, and then to provide great livelihoods for the farm workers that participate in our program. And we have partnered back in 2018 with the Milk with Dignity program. And that program is in place. We're actually going on our 8th year, and it's become a proven mechanism for upholding and the enforcement of a variety of different labor standards on the farm, which we'll get into, but not limited to minimum cash wages, suitable housing, and then fair labor practices. So it's helped to boost some of the work that the dairies we've been working with we're already doing and continuing to work on. Second pillar.
Got a question here, Representative Osmond.
Oh, yeah, actually, on the second one, can you just explain a little bit more what tethering phase out means?
Yeah, sure. Well, specific to that question, tethering is the tying of animals. We're over the next few years, we're trying to move away from, we want to have the animals not tied up for any period of time, and to be able to be in loose housing where they can roam around and be able to move around.
And also go outside?
That is part of the requirements around outdoor access within the program that we work with, which is the Global Animal Partnership.
So you currently wouldn't have cows that are always tied up and always inside? Because I know there are farms in Vermont where they still keep all the cows inside.
There are dairies that have different, we work with a variety of different dairies. The smallest farm we work with is, milks 25 cows. On the upper end, it's more like 800, 850 cows. There's a variety of different, housing structures. But I think some of the key tenets, for us is to be able to allow the cows to roam around freely, and to be able to get some access to sunlight and things of that nature for the animals. And so we work within a third-party independent animal care standard called Global Animal Partnership. It's relatively new. We've been working with them for 4 years now, and it's a third-party standard that goes in and does an annual audit of the farms to ensure things like on-farm enrichments, whether that be cow brushes, making sure adequate ventilation, things along those lines. And then really with the young stock, really trying to drive that opportunity for social interaction and natural behavior for the young stock themselves. So I'll get a little bit more into GAP, I think in a couple of slides. But the third piece is around, it's really around our regenerative ag practices that we're trying to drive. And, the goals of those are to build soil resilience, farm resilience, where you've got healthy enough soils that can handle, unfortunately, some of the extreme weather events that we've experienced over the last decade. The goal is to optimize and reduce outside inputs to the extent possible, and really try to push and drive increasing the amount of grass and homegrown feed in the diet of the animals. Our fourth pillar is around, and it's our newest pillar, and that is around you're really trying to figure out how to reduce on-farm greenhouse gas emissions. And so I'll be speaking to a project where we're really trying to hone in on what are the things that are feasible and scalable within that space. But as of right now, we do have on-farm greenhouse gas footprints on all the farms that we work with within the program.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you. Tom, what are you finding with your carbon footprints on the dairy farms? Are they close to carbon neutral, or are we way off? We have a lot of work to do, or?
So, I think, I'm certainly not, I'm the dairy guy. I'm not the carbon expert, but I can tell you, I mean, we work within science-based targets for Ben and Jerry's. And, a big part of our carbon footprint comes from our dairy supply. And, what our goal is to try to get our carbon footprint, carbon emissions on dairy farms cut in half, is really what we're striving for. And so, relative, to other dairies in the US, I think that, with this program being in place since 2011, there's a lot of practices that have been implemented that have helped us along the way. But to really get where we need to, there's a couple specific intervention categories in the areas of manure management and really reducing enteric emissions, which is basically the emissions coming out of the cow itself, to try to drive down on-farm footprints. But I will be speaking to that we've made some good progress, and the farmers have made some really good progress in that space. So just diving into the labor pillar, we were the first brand to sign on to participate in the Milk with Dignity program here in the U.S. Again, it's comprehensive. It involves audits. It involves significant collaboration with the dairy farmers who, have really leaned into this program and has helped to make it sustainable and helped it to grow. And it's enforceable standards in the areas of housing, wages, vacation, sick time, time off, for all qualified workers under the program. And of the 48 farms in the state of Vermont, we have over 200 farm workers that participate within the Milk with Dignity program. Again, on animal care, I guess I went into a little bit more detail on the previous slide, but again, this is a third-party independent standard that we're asking our farmers basically to go through the audit, and with the goal of obtaining certification. And we'll get into some of those numbers in just a bit, but we've made really good progress in continually increasing the number of third-party certified farms to this standard, which is, within the marketplace. To have a true third-party independent animal care standard at scale is unique. In the areas of regenerative agriculture, for us, we kind of look at soil as is kind of the key to everything. And, that top 6 inches of soil is, what allows kind of everything to be. And in terms of the things that we're trying to drive with practices that we have and requirements we have around cover cropping annual acres, which is primarily corn for corn silage, having conservation tillage or no-till practices, having crop rotation practices that go above and beyond. I mean, that's really the trifecta of practices that we're driving here within this pillar, with the idea of that, we want to maximize the amount of feed grown on the farm because we think it's could be more cost effective for the farms. And we also believe that it's a way that you can know how that corn or grass or in some cases soybeans was grown. And so that's one of the key pieces. We want to optimize the amount of grass in the diet. Driving as much roughage as possible has a variety of different benefits for the dairy farms. And then for those acres that are annual crops, we want to do it as best as we can. We want to protect that soil. We want to try to fix nitrogen so that it's readily available for the plants when planting time comes, and really try to have living roots for as many months as possible, which can be a challenge here in Vermont and the climate that we have. And ultimately, if we're able to do these things and we're doing them successfully, there's going to be water quality benefits. There's going to be the ability to maybe not completely eliminate, but to be able to reduce the use of synthetic inputs and things of that nature. So healthy soil is a critical piece to the program. To your question on the carbon footprinting, our baseline year at Ben and Jerry's, it was 2015. And through 2022, is the most up-to-date numbers we have. In the US, our carrying dairy farms have reduced their on-farm greenhouse gas footprint by 13%, compared to 14% for the farms over primarily in the Netherlands. And, that's really been a function of a variety of different things. Improved genetics, improved feed quality, improved milk yields, but it's really driven fat and protein corrected milk, which, outside of enteric and manure interventions, is the biggest thing that we can do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions on farm, is what we found so far. Just to give a sense of the scope of the program, there are 51 farms overall, so we do have a few farms over in northeastern New York. Represents a little over 20,000 lactating cows, 25,000 acres of grass, 18,000 acres of primarily corn for corn silage, and then 16,000 acres of forest. Vermont and the Northeast is unique in that many of the farms are not just the ag acres, the tillable acres, but there's a lot of forest land as part of the farm as well. So overall, almost 60,000 acres participating in the US. So some of the impacts that we've had around cover cropping. This past year, we were able to bring on some new farms that got us up to, I think they said, the 51, when including Vermont and northeastern New York. But over 75% of the corn acres were planted with a cover crop here in the state. Over 55% of the farms participating didn't just go through the GAP animal care audit, but they received certification of a third-party animal care standard. And the balance of the farms that have not yet gotten certified, it's more of a function of it's capital investment, some of the changes to adhere to the standards. All of the carrying dairy program on an annual basis, every farm is third-party audited to our requirements, and 86% of our acres were planted. Our annual acres were planted with either no-till or minimum till practices. So just to give a real specific example of some of the impacts that the programming has had on farms is in the area of every farm has a nutrient mass balance done. We work with Cornell University in order to calculate these, but basically it looks all of the imports and exports of nutrients on the farm. And then it provides an optimal range for the farms to try to get into. And this is certainly one of the success stories you'll see here, that nitrogen, which is a commercial fertilizer used to help the growth of grasses as well as annual crops. This particular case, the farmer was essentially able through learnings and working with as an agronomist, with the data through this Cornell tool, basically to cut the amount of nitrogen per acre in half. In this case, from 174 pounds down to 83 pounds of nitrogen, which has a variety of benefits to the fields, to the environment, to the farmer's wallet. And so, these are things that we're finding a lot of value in on multiple fronts. As it relates to the soils themselves, a couple of years ago, there was a state of soil health initiative conducted by a number of different entities. One of them was UVM Extension. And basically, it looked at a subset of our carrying dairy farms, 7 of them that are participating in a project to figure out the most cost-effective interventions to reduce on-farm greenhouse gas emissions. And what we found is that relative to the state, our soil, those soils were outperforming the average within the state of Vermont, with the 2 exceptions being hardness, soil hardness and compaction. But what I've been told, the reason for that is that the year that we pulled the samples, it was dry as could be in I think it was 2020, the fall of 2020, and we just weren't able to get great samples there. So we really believe that with all these different ask that we back up with investment for farms that, you know, it's building soil resiliency. Hopefully it's building economic resiliency for the farms. And so just a couple of comparisons on average. This was 2024 data. Carrying Dairy's average butter fat was higher than those farms reported under the Federal Order 1 milk market in the Northeast. If you look at the last 12 years, well, unfortunately, we have seen a decline in the number of farms where some of the farms in Carrying Dairy have sold their animals. It's at a much slower rate than the average decline within the state. If you look at soil health, and one of the key metrics is organic matter, we're ahead of the game relative to the state of Vermont as well as New York for those participating in Carrying Dairy. And with the 2022 data that I was able to receive from UVM Extension, in 2022, the 24,000 annual acres cover crop, almost half of that came from farms within Carrying Dairy. So, you know, we ask farms to do a variety of different things, but this is, for me, you know, where the rubber really hits the road, when, you know, farmers change and they implement a different practice. And then, you know, the different practice is recognized as helping them to become more sustainable from a variety of different angles. And so I believe this was 2 years ago, we had some significant floods, 3 years ago, some significant floods in the month of July. And one of the farms reported that if they hadn't switched to no-till corn planting, they would have lost half their topsoil to the river. And so, you know, hopefully these practices that we think having tremendous benefits, you know, it's certainly, we're very pleased when farmers are recognizing the same thing as they're participating in the program. So I've only got just a few slides left, but I wanted to talk a little bit about a subset of the Carrying Dairy program, which is called the Low Carbon Dairy Project, and just kind of tee that up with the idea that we really believe at Ben & Jerry's that dairy farms can be part of the solution to climate change, and that we can, with different interventions, we can really kind of change the storyline for dairy within the state, and then within the broader country. In late 2021, Ben & Jerry's, we received a grant from our parent company Unilever, from its Climate and Nature Fund. It was a 3-year grant that runs through the end of this year, but basically it allowed us to work with 7 farms here in Vermont and 10 farms in Europe, basically doing very intensive work on different interventions to reduce on-farm emissions, with the goal of reducing emissions by 50%. I can tell you that being that we're on the tail end in the final year of the project, we are not going to hit the 50% reduction, and I can speak to why. But we've made some really good progress, especially in the area of building farm resilience from a number of different aspects. So I think I might have mentioned before, roughly half of our greenhouse gas emissions come from our dairy supply, which was one of the key items that really kind of drove us to apply for this project money. And when you break down our emissions within dairy, you know, it really breaks out into a variety of different categories. But you can see here that enteric emissions and manure emissions are the 2 biggest opportunities in this particular space. And so we're looking on these 7 farms at different manure management opportunities, cropping opportunities. We're looking at, you know, renewables, nature and biodiversity, which is biodiversity is already part of the Carrying Dairy program, and some of the things that we've talked about around animal care, homegrown feed, and then enteric emissions. So I just wanted to highlight the 2 biggest opportunities. One is around enteric. To hit our targets within dairy, an enteric solution is critical. And again, that's the emissions coming from the animal itself. One of the things that we've taken as a learning is that you know, it is a process to get different enteric reducing feed additives approved. And so, we've tried to work with a few different companies, work with legislators, down in Washington, to try to move the approval of different feed additives. And it's been a work in progress. We'd hoped to have been able to have trialed more in this space, but this is the biggest opportunity, which has led us to, trying to drive fat and protein corrected milk, as we wait for some of these opportunities to come to the table. When we talk about manure management, one of the key things is basically reducing or eliminating the methane that comes from manure pit. And so there's different ways to do that. There's manure separators that take the solids out of the manure. There's manure digesters, where you're essentially generating electricity through burning and running an engine off of the gases from the manure. And we're working to try to get those types of technologies that work on medium-sized farms. Typically, you see digesters on larger farms, and we're really focused on trying to get it on farms that could work at all different sizes. And we actually have a project in Franklin County where we have a digester operating on a medium-sized farm. And there's been a lot of learnings there. It's taken a while to get things ramped up, but we're continuing to see progress in that space, and we're hopeful that at some point in the future, it's something that could expand. If you look at just the 7 farms, I think there's 2 more slides left. If you just look at the 7 farms within the low carbon dairy project, through 2022, they've reduced their footprint by 16%, and we're hoping to have the 2023 numbers out and verified as hopefully in the coming months. Unfortunately, you have to collect the data a year later, and then it takes a while to go through the calculation. But we work with the Cool Farm tool, greenhouse gas calculator, for this calculation. So to kind of sum things up, there's a lot of different things that we're asking farms to do. We're supporting them with investment. Since 2011, we've invested over $40 million on farms participating in carrying dairy in the U.S., which is primarily here in the state of Vermont. And it has been, a large investment. It has been very much worthwhile to build soil health, which ultimately is helping to protect our waterways, and it's really helping build resiliency for farms. As we know, we're going to continue to need butterfat for many years to come, and having that resiliency is critical. And we want to try to do things as best as we can, move the needle on environment, move the needle on reducing emissions. We probably don't always get it right, but certainly we're trying different things, and our farms are leaning in to be willing to try to different things to make progress. And so we're hopeful that at the end of this year, with the conclusion of the low carbon dairy project, that in future years we'll be able to incorporate some of those successful and feasible learnings into the broader carrying dairy program. And so we're hopeful that we're going to be able to do just that.
Great. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
Let's see, we got Representative Basil.
Yeah, just 2 quick questions. So you mentioned early on about how all you really use out of the milk is the butter fat and then some small components of skim milk or something like that. So what happens to the rest? I mean, it sounds like 90% of the milk that you get, you're not using. So is that waste, or does some other producer end up using that part of the milk that your company doesn't need?
So I basically about 12% of what's in 100 pounds of milk is milk solids, which is fat, it's non-fat solids, it's other non-fat solids, proteins. So 87-88% of the milk is water. And so that water, is through separation, through condensing, that water is extracted out of the milk. In many cases, at many plants, it's repurposed for washing equipment, doing a variety of different things. And so, what dairy buyers are buying is really just that 12%. It's the solids, it's the proteins, it's the fats. So we're buying, when you look at 100 pounds of milk, if we buy all the fat out of that 100 pounds of milk, we're then buying about half as much of the non-fat solids. So the balance of the non-fat solids, a plant could sell it to another customer. They could make it into powder. They could do a variety of different things with it. Yeah, the 87% is water, and that's not utilized in the dairy side.
That's fine. Then the other question I have, I was just curious if you talked about in terms of trying, and I don't, this is a new word to me, but trying to reduce the enteric impact through food additives. What does that look like? What are you putting into the diet of the cows to change their enteric emissions?
Yeah, so there's a variety of different products that are in trial phase, but it's really looking at feed additives where on a very small level you can add a feed additive to the dairy ration for the animals, and basically there's a variety of different things that can change the process within the rumination of the animal and the production of milk that can drive the amount of emissions coming out of the cow. So there's different things that are out there. There's different seaweeds, natural seaweeds that are out there that can have an impact without having negative consequences by any means on the animal's production, on the component production. There's some new products that have recently starting to come out on the market around there's essential oils, and then there's products that do drive in components or claim to drive components in production, but that's what's meant by feed additives.
Okay.
I think I saw 20% of the milk that you use, or 20% of something related to the Caring Dairy program. Can you talk a little bit more about that? So it's not that all of your supply comes from farms that participate in the Caring Dairy, but 20% is the target, or?
Yep. So we do not have dedicated segregated dairy supply. So if we bought in butterfat the milk equivalent of, just say, for example, 100 million pounds of milk annually, we want to have 100 million pounds of milk participating in our Caring Dairy program, is how that structure works. So what I was saying, the 20% was that if you look at the volume that we have participating in Caring Dairy, which is made up of those 51 farms, of which 48 are here in Vermont, that volume represents about 20% of Vermont's overall dairy milk production.
Got it. Representative O'Brien.
Is all the Ben & Jerry's consumed in the US made in the two plants in Vermont?
I do not have specific numbers, but I believe it's over 90% of the dairy is manufactured in our Vermont facilities, with the exception of some novelty type products.
Yeah, and I was just wondering about, I was just looking up in Hellendoorn, your plant in the Netherlands. Do those farms that are supplying that, or the component, the farms that supply the components, do they, in the EU, do they have the sort of 4 buckets you're talking about sort of baked into farming over there, or are there similar programs that are sort of voluntary that you want your farms to belong to?
Yeah, in Europe, in particular the Netherlands, the pillars are the same, so we are trying to drive the same targets. The regulations in the Netherlands are very, very different than here in the US, and so how we go about hitting our targets within each of those pillars may be a little bit different. So, for example, there's a common greenhouse gas calculation tool in the Netherlands. That's not the case here in the US.
Thank you.
Other questions? Not seeing any, Tom. So.
Just one
Yeah.
quick, one more technical one along Chair was talking about. So you essentially buy your components from the St. Albans Cooperative. They create say butter fat for you, and then you buy that for your processing plant.
We aren't buying milk directly, so we have to work we work generally with what would be called a balancing plant, but generally those are owned by cooperatives, of which we certainly purchase a significant amount of butter fat out of the St. Albans Creamery location.
Yeah.
Tom, are you in a position at all to tell us about what the Ben and Jerry's in the news recent stories of your parent company firing the CEO and lawsuits, I understand, that Ben and Jerry's are filing to protect the brand?
They're trying to buy that.
Yeah, I mean, fair questions. I'm happy to get you folks in touch with our public relations representative, but generally speaking, I'm around the Ben and Jerry's office. I'm the dairy guy, so that's a little bit out of my lane. But I'd be happy to get you in touch with someone if you're interested.
I appreciate that. Yep, and appreciate that you're the dairy guy and not the public affairs guy.
Can I ask one more question?
Please.
So I know you're the dairy guy, but Ben and Jerry's actually has a really extensive collection of non-dairy ice creams, which I have family members that very much appreciate. And so are those also made in Vermont, or are those made somewhere else?
I'm certainly not the expert on the non-dairy, but certainly we have a growing number of consumers and fans that that's a great option, and they enjoy those products as well. My understanding is that they are manufactured and the pints are put together here at our Vermont manufacturing.
Thank you.
Right. Well, Tom, thanks again for your time this afternoon and for adjusting your schedule, and we'll look forward to seeing you in person again at some point.
All right. Well, thank you for the time and the opportunity to share a little bit about what we've been working on.
All right.